My grandfather left me $3,500,000. My parents who kicked me out at 18 came smiling to the will reading, saying, "We'll handle it for you." But when the lawyer read the hidden clause, their faces went pale. My name is Oliver. I am 27 years old. And if you had told me 10 years ago that I would one day inherit my grandfather's entire estate, an estate worth a jaw-dropping $3.5 million, I would have laughed in disbelief. Back then, I did not even know if I was going to make it through the week. I did not know where I would sleep, how I would eat, or whether I would ever build a life that felt stable. So the idea that one day I would be sitting in a lawyer's office, holding the future of my family's wealth in my hands, while my estranged parents stared at me like vultures circling prey, would have sounded impossible. The irony was brutal. These were the same parents who had cut me off when I turned 18, the same parents who had thrown me out with nothing but a backpack and told me I was no longer their responsibility. And yet, there they were, suddenly reappearing at my grandfather's will reading, as if the last decade had never happened. Growing up, my family was complicated. My mom and dad were not poor. We lived in a comfortable suburban home, the kind with a neat lawn, framed family photos, and neighbors who waved from driveways. My dad worked as a regional manager for a logistics company, and my mom was a part-time teacher who loved acting like she ran the entire neighborhood. But they had one fatal flaw. Appearances meant everything to them. My older sister Claire was the golden child. She was the straight-A student, the cheerleader, the one who never caused trouble. In their eyes, she could do no wrong. She smiled the right way, dressed the right way, said the right things in front of the right people. And my parents treated her like proof that their family was perfect. I, on the other hand, was painted as the disappointment. I was not rebellious. Not really. I did not sneak out every night, I did not get arrested, and I did not spend my life trying to embarrass them. I just did not fit the mold they had created for me. I liked art more than football. I liked books more than cars. I asked questions when they expected obedience. I had a stubborn streak that made me challenge things they wanted me to accept without argument. To them, that was unforgivable. The cracks really started to show when I became a teenager. Anytime money was involved, it became a weapon. Claire got a brand new car for her 17th birthday, while I was told to be grateful for hand-me-downs. Claire got her college tuition fully covered, while I was told that if I wanted to go, I had better figure it out myself. She got help encouragement gifts and second chances. I got lectures. When I tried to ask why things were so unequal, my parents turned it into proof that something was wrong with me. My mom would roll her eyes and say, "Oliver, you have always been too sensitive. You expect the world to hand you things." My dad would mutter about how I would never make it without them. I will never forget one dinner in particular. My father leaned across the table, looked me dead in the eye, and said, "If you are still under our roof by 18, you are a failure." I laughed when he said it because I did not know what else to do, but inside I was crushed. When my 18th birthday came, they did not just kick me out. They staged it like a performance. They sat me down, told me they were cutting me off financially, and said it was time for me to learn the value of hard work. There was no kindness in it, no concern, no plan. They gave me no money, no support, and no safety net. I walked out of that house with a backpack, 2 changes of clothes, and a part-time job that barely paid enough for groceries. That night, I slept in the backseat of my car. Meanwhile, Claire was posting photos from her sorority house on Instagram, smiling with a shiny new MacBook and a credit card from Dad. The only person who did not abandon me was my grandfather. He was my dad's father, Harold Montgomery, and he had always been different from the rest of them. Where my parents saw weakness, he saw potential. Where they mocked me for being quiet, he would say, "Oliver, that is because you think before you speak." He did not care that I was not the athlete, the golden child, or the perfect son my parents wanted to show off. He saw me for who I was. He would invite me over on weekends, feed me, and let me crash on his couch when things got bad. I never told him the full extent of what my parents had done. I was ashamed. I did not want to admit how alone I was. But Grandpa was not stupid. He saw the tension. He saw the way my father spoke to me. He saw how I flinched whenever my dad's name came up. Over the years, he became more of a father to me than my actual father ever was. Fast forward nearly a decade. I had built a modest life for myself. It was not glamorous. I worked long hours, saved where I could, and kept my distance from my family. Claire would occasionally send smug text about her vacations, her new house, or whatever milestone she wanted to use to remind me that she still saw me as beneath her. My parents were mostly silent unless they needed something. Then suddenly I would get a call with my mom's syrupy voice saying, "Oliver, honey, how are you doing?" I knew better than to fall for it. I kept my answers short. I was not going to become their backup plan. Then came the phone call I had both dreaded and expected. My grandfather had passed away. It gutted me. Even though he had been sick for a while, I had convinced myself he would pull through. Losing him felt like losing the only real family I had ever had. When the lawyer called and told me I was expected at the will reading, I assumed I might receive a watch, a letter, maybe some small sentimental item. I thought Grandpa might have left me something personal. Something that said he remembered me. I did not think for 1 second that I would be the one inheriting everything. When I walked into the oak-paneled lawyer's office, I froze. Sitting there, dressed as if they were on their way to a gala, were my parents and Claire. My mother's smile was wide and polished. My father rested one hand smugly on his knee. Claire gave me a slow once-over, as if she was already measuring how much I was worth. I wanted to turn around and leave. Instead, I forced myself into a seat. The air was thick with fake sweetness. My mom leaned toward me and whispered, "Do not worry, Oliver. We will make sure the estate is taken care of properly." My dad added, "Yes, of course. We will manage it for you." They were already counting the money in their heads. I could see it in their eyes. They still thought I was that powerless kid they had kicked to the curb. Then the lawyer cleared his throat, shuffled the papers, and said the words that made my heart pound. Per the wishes of the late Mr. Harold Montgomery, his entire estate, valued at approximately $3.5 million, is hereby left to his grandson, Oliver Montgomery. I swear time stopped. I looked up, and for a split second, I thought I could see my grandfather's smirk in my mind, as if he had been planning this moment all along. My parents' smiles froze in place. Claire's jaw actually dropped. Then the lawyer turned the page and said, "There are additional stipulations you will want to hear." And that was when things took a turn none of us were prepared for. My mother was the first one to recover from the shock, though her voice came out too high and too sweet, like she was trying to cover panic with frosting. "Well, of course that makes sense," she said, clapping her hands together lightly. "Oliver was always so close to Dad, but naturally Oliver will need our guidance. He is inexperienced with finances. We will step in, won't we, dear?" She turned to my father, who nodded as if the whole thing had already been decided. My father leaned back in his chair and steepled his fingers. Yes, Harold meant well, I am sure. But Oliver is not equipped to handle an estate of this size. $3.5 million is a lot for someone with no background. It could ruin him. It is only logical that we manage the funds on his behalf. The way he said ruin him made my stomach twist. They did not see me as a person. They saw me as an obstacle standing between them and a fortune. Claire smirked and tucked her hair behind her ear, like she was already imagining herself spending the money. Honestly, Oliver, do not take this the wrong way, but you have never been, well, responsible. Remember when you maxed out that tiny credit card freshman year? She laughed under her breath as if one mistake from years ago defined my entire life. And Dad is right. A sudden windfall could really mess you up. Let us help. The lawyer cleared his throat again, cutting straight through their little performance. "If I may," he said. "Mr. Montgomery specified very clearly that the estate belongs to Oliver alone. No trustees, no oversight. Full control." His eyes flicked toward me briefly, almost as if he was saying, "Your grandfather knew exactly what they would try to do." That did not stop my parents. My mother placed a hand on my arm. Her nails dug just slightly into my sleeve. "Oliver, sweetheart, you know we only want what is best for you. We can guide you through this. We can make sure you do not make mistakes. Think of it like a family effort. Grandpa would want all of us to benefit." That word, benefit, hung heavy in the room. Benefit for them, not for me. I stayed quiet and tried to keep my face neutral, but inside, I was boiling. All those years of being told I was not enough. All those years of being pushed aside for Claire. All those nights sleeping in my car while they laughed over vacation photos. And now they thought they could swoop in and control the one thing my grandfather had left me. In that moment, it was not even about the money. It was about the arrogance. It was the assumption that I could not possibly handle my own life unless they were standing over me, directing it, judging it, and taking whatever they wanted from it. Claire crossed her legs and leaned forward. Her voice was soft, but every word dripped with condescension. Look, Oliver, you have done fine for yourself, I guess. But this is different. You do not want to end up like those lottery winners who go broke in a year, right? I mean, think about it. You are not even a homeowner. You still rent, do you not? You do not have experience investing. What if you blow it all? She gave a little shrug. It just makes sense that Dad handles it. He has been managing money his whole career. What she did not say, but what I heard all the same, was that she still thought I was the failure, the one lagging behind, the one they could keep under their thumbs. The lawyer did not even look up from his papers this time. Again, Mr. Montgomery's instructions are explicit. No one but Oliver is to control or manage the estate. My father's jaw tightened, but he forced a smile. Of course, we're just concerned, that is all. You understand, son. He said son like it was some warm term of endearment, but it felt hollow. This was the same man who told me I would never make it without him. The same man who watched me pack my things on my 18th birthday without offering so much as $20 for food. Now he wanted me to hand over millions out of gratitude. My mother gave a little laugh and tilted her head. Oliver, you know, we always wanted the best for you. Maybe we were tough on you, but look how strong you have become. That was our way of preparing you. Do not hold grudges. Let us move forward as a family. I nearly choked at the hypocrisy. Preparing me, by throwing me out, by letting me struggle while they showered Claire with everything, by turning every hardship they caused into proof of their wisdom. My grandfather had prepared me, not them. He taught me resilience, patience, and the value of quiet strength. Still, I said nothing. I wanted to hear every manipulative word. I wanted them to keep talking. Let them dig their own holes. The lawyer continued reading through the stipulations, but I barely registered the rest of the legal language. My parents were whispering to each other, already strategizing. Claire tapped on her phone under the table, probably texting her boyfriend about how rich she was about to become. I sat still, but inside I felt something shifting. All those years of being dismissed. All those nights wondering if I was worth anything. Suddenly, I had power. And they hated it. When the lawyer finally finished, my mother stood quickly and smoothed her skirt. Well, thank you, Mr. Thompson. Oliver, we will discuss the details at home. You will come over tonight, will you not? She said it as though it was already arranged, as though I would automatically fall back into their orbit. My father added, yes, we will. Get started on a plan. Investments, property management, taxes. Do not worry, we will take care of everything. Then Claire, with that same smug little smirk, leaned in close as we walked out. You are lucky, Oliver. If it were not for us, you would drown in all this. Do not forget who actually knows what they are doing. I clenched my jaw. My fists tightened at my sides. Lucky? No, I was not lucky. I was chosen. My grandfather had seen through all of them and decided to put everything in my hands. As much as they wanted to pretend otherwise, they were no longer in control. But I did not say a word. Not yet, because deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. I left the law office that afternoon with my head spinning and a copy of my grandfather's will clutched in my hands like a lifeline. My parents walked out with brittle smiles, the kind that came from swallowing disappointment in public, but I could feel their eyes burning into my back as I went. I knew them well enough to understand that this was not the end of their schemes. It was only the start. And I was right. That very evening, around 9 p.m., someone knocked on my apartment door. When I opened it, Claire was standing there looking like she had just stepped off a runway. Her perfume hit me before she even spoke. She gave me that same little smirk and slipped past me without asking. Cute place, she said, glancing around my small living room with an exaggerated lift of her eyebrows. But let's be honest, Oliver, this will not do anymore. You will need something grander. And you know who can help with that? Me. I closed the door slowly, already exhausted. What do you want, Claire? She dropped onto my couch like she owned it, crossing one leg over the other. Simple. I'm here to make sure you do not embarrass yourself with this inheritance. You have been living small for so long that you do not even realize what you have. Think about it. Dad knows investments, Mom knows people, and she twirled a strand of hair around her finger. I know style. Imagine the three of us helping you. We could turn Grandpa's estate into something even bigger, but only if you stop being stubborn." Her words stung, not because they were true, but because they mirrored every insult my parents had ever thrown at me. Small, stubborn, incompetent. She had learned the script by heart. "I do not need help," I said firmly. "Grandpa left it to me. Not you, not them, me." Her smile faltered for just a second, but she covered it with a laugh. "Oh, Oliver, you really think that? You think Grandpa did not expect you to lean on the family? You would not even have met with that lawyer if Mom had not told you the time." That was when I realized she was not there to help me. She was there to test me. She wanted to see whether I could be pushed, whether I would bend, whether I was still that same kid who could be guilted and cornered into doing what they wanted. But the real betrayal came a week later. I got a call from the lawyer. His tone was clipped and serious. "Oliver, I need to ask you something. Did you authorize any changes to the estate account?" My stomach dropped. "No. What are you talking about?" "There have been attempts to access the funds," he said. "Someone presented themselves at the bank as your representative. Luckily, the bank flagged it because of the stipulations in the will, but they were very insistent. They claimed you had verbally authorized it." I knew immediately who it was. My parents. That night, I drove past their house. It looked exactly the way I remembered it. 2 cars in the driveway, the porch light glowing warmly, the windows giving off that picture-perfect image of suburban comfort. I sat there, in the dark, hands gripping the steering wheel, staring at the home I had been exiled from. And for the first time, I did not feel sadness. I did not feel longing. I felt cold, calculated, because this was not just manipulation anymore. This was theft. They were willing to break the law, forge authority, and lie to the bank just to strip me of what my grandfather had trusted me with. Then, as if the universe wanted to twist the knife, Claire texted me later that night. "Do not be naive, Oliver. Money belongs in the hands of people who know how to use it. Be smart, or you will lose it all." I stared at the message for a long time, my heart thudding in my chest. That was the moment something snapped. The betrayal was not only that they had tried to steal from me, it was the realization that they would never see me as anything other than the weak link, the disposable one, the child they had written off. They had cut me off at 18. They had laughed while I scraped by. And now that I finally had something of my own, they wanted to take that too. I put my phone down and sat in the dark thinking about my grandfather. I remembered his voice, steady and firm. I remembered the way he used to look at me and say, "Oliver, do not let anyone tell you what you are worth. You decide that." For years, I had not believed him, but now, with my parents circling like sharks, I finally understood. That night marked the turning point. I was not going to let them manipulate me anymore. And I was not only going to protect what was mine, I was going to make them regret ever underestimating me. But I had no idea just how far they would go next, or how ugly the fight was about to become. The days after the bank incident were some of the darkest I had lived through since the night I was kicked out at 18. At first, I thought I could ignore my parents' schemes, cut them out completely and move on with my life. But that was not how they worked. They had a way of clawing into every crack, forcing themselves into places they did not belong, until you felt suffocated. I started noticing strange things. One morning, I went down to my car and found a deep scratch carved along the side. It was not random. It was deliberate and jagged, like someone had taken a key and dragged it from the front bumper all the way to the taillight. Later that week, I got an email from my landlord saying they had received multiple anonymous complaints about noise from my apartment. I lived alone. I barely played music. I worked late most nights. It was obvious someone was trying to make trouble for me. Then came the whispers. My parents still lived in the same town where I had grown up, and they had their little circle of friends, the country club crowd, the church crowd, the neighbors who thrived on gossip. Suddenly, people were looking at me differently when I ran errands around town. The cashier at the grocery store, who used to smile at me, raised her eyebrows when I paid in cash. A woman at the gas station muttered, "Must be nice, living off an old man's money." I knew where it came from. My parents had started painting me as the greedy, undeserving grandson who had swooped in and stolen the family estate. The worst part was not even the slander, it was the silence. The few friends I had in town stopped calling. They had heard the rumors too, and maybe part of them believed it. I had worked so hard to build a reputation as someone dependable, someone who could be trusted. And now my parents were trying to undo all of it. I hit a low point one night, sitting alone at my kitchen table, staring at a stack of bills in front of me. Not because I could not pay them. I had access to funds now. I stared at them because I was terrified. Terrified that if I used my grandfather's money too openly, it would feed the story my parents were spinning. Terrified that every move I made would be twisted into proof that I was not capable of handling what I had been given. That was when the old doubts crept back in. Maybe they were right. Maybe I was not strong enough. Maybe I would drown in this inheritance exactly the way they said I would. For hours, I sat there replaying every insult, every dismissal, every memory of being told I was worthless. It felt like I was 18 again, curled up in the backseat of my car, wondering if I would even make it to the next week. Then I opened the drawer of the table and found something I had nearly forgotten. It was an envelope my grandfather had given me on my 21st birthday. I had kept it all those years without really looking at it again. Inside was a letter written in his firm, slightly shaky handwriting. Oliver, if you are reading this, I hope you have learned by now that the world does not give you anything. It tries to take. Do not let them. You are stronger than you know, and one day you will have to prove it. When that time comes, do not shrink back. Stand tall. They can only take from you if you hand it to them. I read the letter over and over until the words burned into me. My grandfather had known. He had seen through my parents long before I ever did, and he had trusted me to rise above them. That night, something shifted in me. I was still at rock bottom. I was lonely, beaten down, and overwhelmed. But I started to plan quietly and carefully. I began documenting everything. I kept copies of the bank's report about the attempted account access. I saved Claire's text messages. I wrote down every rumor I heard in town and where it seemed to have come from. At work, I started staying late using the company's public computers to research estate law, trust funds, and property management. If they wanted to treat me like I was incapable, I was going to make sure I became the most capable person in the room. I did not tell anyone what I was doing. I smiled when people sneered. I stayed calm when my parents sent their little barbs. I acted like I was backing down. All the while, I was building something quietly beneath the surface. It was lonely. It was painful. Every day felt like walking a tightrope over an endless drop. But there was a strange power in the silence. For the first time, I was not reacting. I was preparing. And I had the distinct, unshakable feeling that my grandfather would have been proud. I did not know when or how, but I swore to myself that the day would come when the balance shifted. One day I would stop being the target. One day I would be the one holding the strings. I just did not realize how quickly that opportunity would arrive or how brutally my parents would try to force my hand. The shift did not happen overnight, but once it began, it felt unstoppable, like a tide finally turning in my favor after years of being dragged under. I kept my head down, worked long hours, and poured myself into learning everything I could about handling wealth responsibly. It was not really about the money itself. It was about proving to myself that I was not the helpless child my parents had always claimed I was. The first real turning point came when I hired a financial advisor, not someone flashy, not someone connected to my parents' world. I hired a quiet, meticulous man named Richard, who had been recommended through a coworker. He was not impressed by the size of the estate, and he did not treat me like a child. He sat across from me with a yellow legal pad, asked careful questions, and listened to my answers without judgment. By the end of our first meeting, he handed me a simple plan: diversified investments, taxes covered, long-term security built in. Then he shook my hand and said, "You are more than capable, Oliver. You just needed someone to confirm it." Those words lit something inside me. For the first time, I felt like I was not merely holding on to my grandfather's gift out of fear. I was building on it. I used part of the estate to buy a modest home in a quieter part of town. Nothing ostentatious. Nothing my parents could sneer at as showing off. But it was mine. The first night I walked through those empty rooms, I stood in the middle of the living room and let the silence wash over me. No one could throw me out of this place. No one could tell me I did not belong here. The keys in my pocket were proof that I had finally carved out something real. At work, things started changing too. For years, I had been just another name on the payroll. But with my grandfather's letter in the back of my mind, I started pushing harder. I volunteered for projects. I stayed late. I delivered more than people expected. Slowly, people began to notice. A promotion came. It was small, but significant. My boss told me, "You have leadership in you, Oliver. You just need to believe it yourself." I did not broadcast any of this. I knew better than to let my parents catch wind of how well things were going. But inevitably, word trickled out. Small-town gossip had a way of circling back. Soon enough, I started hearing different whispers. He bought a house. He has a new job title. Maybe Harold knew what he was doing after all. The rumors my parents had spread were starting to crack. In their place, something else began to form. Respect. Even if it was grudging, it was real. And that respect terrified my parents more than anything. One evening, Claire showed up at my new house uninvited. I did not let her pass the porch. She stood there in heels with her arms folded. Her expression caught somewhere between disbelief and irritation. "Nice place," she said flatly. "Did you decorate it yourself, or did you finally get someone to hold your hand?" I did not bite. I leaned against the doorframe and said, "I'm doing fine, Claire. Better than fine." Her eyes narrowed. "Do not get cocky, Oliver. You think one house and one job promotion means you have won? Dad is already looking into ways to—" She stopped herself, biting her lip. But I caught it. "Dad is already looking into ways to—" what? "Regain control. Undermine me." It did not matter. I knew then that they had not given up. That was when I realized my rise was not only about survival anymore. It was about positioning. Every step forward was leverage. Every success was a weapon they could not take from me. I began aligning myself with people outside my family's reach. I joined a local charity board in my grandfather's name, honoring the quiet work he had done for years. I worked with people who respected him, people who remembered his integrity and generosity. With each handshake and each connection, I was weaving a net of support around myself, one my parents could not break with gossip alone. Inside, I was still cautious. I still carried the scars of those early years. But for the first time, I felt a quiet confidence building. My parents had expected me to stumble. They had expected me to drown in responsibility. Instead, I was learning to swim in deeper water than they had ever imagined. Still, I kept my preparations hidden. I knew the storm was not over. If anything, it was gathering. And when it broke, I wanted to be ready, because I could feel it coming. My parents were not the type to accept defeat quietly. They had tried manipulation. They had tried theft. They had tried slander. None of it had worked. Their next move I knew would be bigger, more desperate. And when it came, I had to be in a position not just to defend myself, but to strike back. The setup came almost by accident, though. In hindsight, it felt like my grandfather's hand was guiding me even years after his passing. I had been attending more of those charity board meetings, the ones I joined in his honor. At one of those gatherings, I met a man named Daniel Grant. Daniel was in his late 50s, a retired attorney, with sharp eyes and the kind of calm presence that made people lean in when he spoke. He had known my grandfather personally. Apparently, they had played chess together every Thursday night for nearly a decade. When he found out who I was, his expression softened. "Harold was a rare man," he said, shaking my hand firmly. "I hope you know how proud he was of you." Something about the way he said it felt different, almost conspiratorial. Over coffee later that week, Daniel leaned across the table and lowered his voice. "You should be careful," he said. "Your grandfather anticipated that there might be trouble after he passed. He put certain protections in place." I froze. Protections? What kind of protections? Daniel smiled faintly. "That is something we can talk about more formally. But let's just say Harold was not blind to your parents' nature. He made sure the estate would be safeguarded in ways they would not expect. If they overstep, it will not just be morally wrong. It will be legally disastrous for them." For the first time, I realized I was not just playing defense. I had ammunition. Over the next few weeks, Daniel helped me understand exactly what my grandfather had done. The estate was not just a lump sum of money. It had been carefully structured. There were deeds, shares, and a small portfolio of properties, and even a trust earmarked specifically for philanthropic projects in my name. More importantly, there were clauses, ironclad stipulations. They explicitly disinherited my parents if they attempted to interfere or present themselves as representatives of the estate. My grandfather had written it all down, signed it, and had it notarized as though he knew they would try to take what was not theirs. As Daniel laid everything out piece by piece, I felt something shift inside me. All those years, I thought I had been alone, powerless, scrambling to survive. It turned out my grandfather had been planning for this exact moment. He had seen the storm coming, and he had left me not only the resources to withstand it, but the leverage to fight back. Meanwhile, my parents grew bolder. I started getting letters in the mail. Formal-looking envelopes with their names typed neatly at the bottom. They were proposals for how I should allocate the inheritance. One suggested putting Claire on the payroll as a family liaison. Another recommended selling off the estate properties to avoid management headaches and, of course, funneling the proceeds into trusted family accounts. I did not respond to any of them, but I kept every letter filed neatly in a folder exactly as Daniel advised. Paper trails are powerful, he told me. Every word they put in writing is another rope they are tying around their own throats. At the same time, I was climbing higher in my own right. Work recognized me again, this time with a significant promotion that came with more authority and a seat at the table during strategy meetings. Suddenly, people who had once overlooked me were asking for my opinion and nodding when I spoke. It was not about the money anymore. It was about respect, real respect, earned through persistence and competence. And with respect came allies. The more people saw me stepping into my own, the more they began to push back quietly against the rumors my parents had planted. At community events, I overheard comments like, "Oliver has really turned out well. And you can tell Harold raised him right." Every little remark chipped away at the false image my parents had tried to build. The best part was that they did not know. They had no idea that while they were scheming behind closed doors, I was gathering allies' documents and quiet influence. They still thought I was the boy they had tossed out with nothing but a backpack. They thought I would cave, hand over the reins, and thank them for it. But I was not that boy anymore. I was a man with power. Power they could not see coming. Then came the moment that tied everything together. One evening, Daniel handed me a small leather-bound notebook worn at the edges. "Your grandfather asked me to hold on to this until I felt you were ready," he said. Inside were pages of my grandfather's handwriting. Notes, reflections, memories, and near the back, there was a detailed outline of how to counter every move he predicted my parents might make. He had not just left me money, he had left me a playbook. As I closed the notebook, my hands trembled. I realized something with bone-deep certainty. The time for simply surviving was over. I was not just going to defend what was mine. I was going to set the stage so that when my parents inevitably made their next move, I would be ready to crush it completely. They wanted to play games with me. They had no idea I was already holding the winning hand. The breaking point came faster than I expected. My parents had been circling for months, sending letters, hinting through neighbors, and making not-so-subtle remarks whenever we crossed paths in town. But when they finally made their move, they went big. Too big. One crisp autumn morning, I got a call from Daniel. His voice was calm, but there was a sharpness in it I had not heard before. "Oliver, your parents filed a petition with the court this morning. They are claiming you are unfit to manage the estate and are requesting guardianship of the assets." Guardianship. They were actually trying to have me declared incompetent at 27 years old. After everything I had built for myself, I almost laughed when he told me. The absurdity was nearly overwhelming. But then the sting hit, because this was not just another attempt to manipulate me behind closed doors. This was public. They were dragging my name through the mud, trying to brand me as incapable in front of the entire community. And that was their mistake. Daniel and I had been preparing for months. Quietly, carefully, we had collected every scrap of evidence of their interference. The attempted bank access, the manipulative letters, the text messages, the rumors they had spread, the stipulations in my grandfather's will, laid out with surgical precision. Piece by piece, we had built a case so airtight, it practically glowed. The court date arrived on a gray Tuesday morning. I walked into that courtroom in a simple suit. No entourage, no theatrics. My parents were already seated, flanking Claire like loyal soldiers. They looked smug, confident, as though the outcome had already been sealed. My mother even had the nerve to smile at me, her expression syrupy and sweet, as if she was forgiving me for forcing this spectacle. When the judge called us to order and my parents' attorney began his opening statement, the cracks showed immediately. He painted me as irresponsible, emotionally unstable, someone prone to financial recklessness. He cited my lack of experience and my modest background. Claire nodded dramatically at every point, playing her role to perfection. Then it was our turn. Daniel rose slowly, his presence commanding without needing to raise his voice. Your Honor, what we have here is not a question of competence. It is a question of greed. Then he began laying out the documents one after another. The forged attempt at the bank, the letters proposing that I hand over control, the text messages dripping with condescension, the stipulations in the will that explicitly disinherited my parents if they so much as attempted to interfere. The courtroom grew quieter with every piece of evidence. My parents shifted uncomfortably. Their smugness began to slip. Claire's jaw tightened, and she folded her arms across her chest. Then came the final blow. Daniel held up the leather-bound notebook my grandfather had left me. Mr. Montgomery anticipated this very situation, Daniel said. In his own handwriting, he described his concerns about his son and daughter-in-law's history of manipulation. He paused, then read from the page. If they attempt to take what is not theirs, it will be proof enough of why I chose Oliver. The words echoed through the courtroom like a gavel strike. I saw my mother's face go pale. My father's fists clenched. Claire's eyes darted to the floor. When the judge finally spoke, her tone was crisp and final. The petition is denied. The estate will remain solely in Oliver Montgomery's control. Furthermore, this court cautions the petitioners against any further attempts to undermine the explicit wishes of the deceased. This matter is closed. It was over in less than an hour, but the fallout was instant. My parents' attempt to seize control had not only failed, it had publicly exposed them for exactly what they were: manipulative, greedy, desperate. As we left the courtroom, my mother tried one last time. She reached out, her voice trembling with false warmth. Oliver, sweetheart, we only did this for you. You do not understand how much pressure this is. Let us. I stopped and looked at her, calmer than I had ever been in my entire life. No, I said, simply. You did it for yourselves. Grandpa knew it, and now everyone else does too. Her hand froze in the air before dropping to her side. My father muttered something under his breath, but he could not even meet my eyes. Claire stormed ahead, her heels clicking like gunshots against the marble floor. I walked out of that courthouse with the weight of years lifted from my shoulders. Not only had I defended my grandfather's trust, I had done it with a calm they never expected from me. They had underestimated me every step of the way. In the end, their own arrogance had undone them. But this was only the beginning of their reckoning. Because while the courtroom had settled the legal battle, the real fallout was still waiting. The social fallout, the personal fallout, the irreversible collapse of the image they had spent decades building. The weeks after the court hearing were like watching dominoes fall, one after another, in slow motion. My parents had walked into that courtroom believing they would win. They believed they could bend the world the same way they had once bent me when I was young. But the judge's ruling had done more than deny their petition. It had stripped away the illusion they had built for decades. And once the mask slipped, the whole town began to see them differently. It started small. My mother's circle of friends at the country club, the women she had spent years gossiping with, began to distance themselves. Where she had once been the center of attention, conversations now stopped when she walked into the room. One woman even told me quietly, "We had no idea how badly they treated you, Oliver. I am sorry." My mother tried to keep up appearances, but the icy smiles and hushed whispers told me her reputation was collapsing. My father fared no better. His company heard about the hearing. Small towns have a way of carrying stories into every corner. And suddenly, his so-called financial expertise was not such an asset anymore. Clients grew wary. Meetings were canceled. Eventually, word spread that he had been asked to take an early retirement. For a man whose identity was tied entirely to his career, the humiliation was devastating. And Claire's fall was the sharpest of all. She had built her social status on being the golden child, the one who could do no wrong, the one who mocked me while being showered with gifts. But after the hearing, people saw her differently. At parties, she was no longer the center of attention. She was just the girl who had tried to steal from her own brother and fail. Her boyfriend left her not long after. Through the grapevine, I heard she had moved back in with my parents. The three of them under one roof again, feeding off each other's bitterness like a slow poison. Meanwhile, my own life expanded in ways I had never imagined. The estate was not just money, it was opportunity. I invested in myself and in projects my grandfather would have been proud of. The charity board grew into something larger, and I found myself stepping into leadership roles where my voice mattered. For the first time in my life, I was not the outsider. I was not the disappointment. I was someone people respected. But the most powerful moment came one evening when I drove past my parents' house, the same house I had been thrown out of when I was 18 with nothing but a backpack. The porch light was on, but the lawn was unkempt. The shutters needed paint. The house looked tired and worn down, almost like the people inside it. I parked across the street for a while and watched. Memories washed over me. The night of my exile. The years of mockery. The endless comparisons to Claire. For so long, that place had represented my failure and my shame. But now looking at it, I felt nothing but clarity. They had not destroyed me. They had forged me. Every insult, every dismissal, every cruel word had built the resolve I carried now. That was when I realized the revenge was complete. Not because I had humiliated them in court, not because they had lost their standing, but because I no longer needed their approval. Their power over me was gone entirely. I rolled down my window and let the cool night air in. Then I whispered words I had never dared say before. Grandpa was right. I decide what I am worth. With that, I put the car in gear and drove away, leaving the house and everything it represented behind me. They had tried to cut me out of their lives. In the end, I had cut them out of mine.